All right. Hi guys. My name is Neil Mistry, and I am a first-year medical student at the University of Ottawa. And so today I'll be going over a list of questions that I have with me about medical school and the experience of applying to medical school, so the onset process. And if you have any questions throughout this taping, then please feel to write them in the comment section below, and I will do my best to answer them for you. So the first question I have here with me is, sorry, before I get started, I'll just introduce my academic background. So I grew up in Toronto, and I went to university at the University of Toronto, Mississauga in biochemistry. So I completed 3 years in undergraduate studies in biochemistry just this past April, and I was lucky enough to get into medical school right after my 3rd year of undergraduate studies. And so I started at the University of Ottawa just 3 weeks back now in September of 2019. In terms of my background, I did it in biochemistry. I took some of the common prerequisites that Ottawa requires, along with some other courses that were of interest to me. And I felt that this was the right balance for me, whether it be medical school or perhaps even if I did not initially plan on going to medical school, maybe in the pharmaceutical industry. I thought that my experience in this program would help, and that's specifically the reason why I chose biochemistry rather than, let's say, human systems biology, cell biology, etc. So now I'll get started off with the questions. The first question I have here is, what advice can you give to medical school applicants? So I think that in terms of advice I can give to medical school applicants, I normally get asked this question many times by current pre-medical students. And I think that it's very important as someone applying to medical school to really stay focused. I do realize personally, having gone through this journey not too far back, that it is a very long journey. It requires a lot of time, a lot of dedication and commitment. And so it's very easy to sort of lose hope, to lose focus, right? Because you normally do have to work your way up throughout your first year of undergrad in order to even be eligible to apply to medical school in Ontario. So I think that staying focused, and also I would suggest that using your time wisely. I do recommend that in order to make sure that you have the extracurriculars, the employment experience, and all the other experiences, research, as well as your prerequisites in time, you definitely need to keep a balanced schedule in order to stay on the right track and make sure that you have the experiences that are necessary to make you competitive for medical school in Ontario. I would definitely also suggest that a lot of people, they tend to follow, I guess, the bandwagon when it comes to the experiences that they require to apply to medical school. A lot of individuals will take up activities or take up research positions that they necessarily aren't interested in, but that they feel compelled to do in order to make them competitive. Personally, from my experience, I would suggest that please don't do these activities if you're not genuinely interested in them, because the medical school committee does find out whether you're applying to any school in Ontario, whether it's UOT, whether it's Ottawa. They do tend to find out, and this really shows, especially at the time of your interview. So it's very important that you stay driven, but you're also doing things that you genuinely do enjoy. Personally, I can say that when I was applying, I knew many other applicants around me who had several publications, several research experiences, and I was really at the start of my research career. So I had no publications when applying for medical school, and I had just 1 or 2 thesis projects that I had done. And I did at times feel uncomfortable seeing my colleagues around me who were also applying with several publications. But I think that what worked in my favor was that I was truly passionate about all the other aspects, the other experiences that I personally had, and that I wasn't just doing, and that's really what made me stand out in a way, that I wasn't just doing the common aspects of research that everyone else has, but I also had experiences that I personally found were very valuable to me. and not just common experiences like, let's say, research, which most undergrad students nowadays have, as well as other extracurriculars like clubs and sports, etc. So I definitely say to stay driven, to keep focused, use your time wisely, and to truly enjoy what you're doing. Because even in medical school, as one of our professors said, that getting into medical school and your journey as a physician, it's more of a marathon than a sprint. So it's not about, you know, who gets there first or who ends up getting their MD first, but it's rather more about who is able to enjoy the process throughout the entire experience. I have colleagues in my class who are in their 30s, some of them who are, you know, just starting their careers, and some of them who are in their 40s as well, and who are just entering medical school. So it's not about, you know, how young you are when you enter medical school. It's about how much you enjoy it. And if you truly enjoy it, regardless of how long it takes, it's something that you will always stay driven for, and it's something that you will always seek out and continue to work hard towards. So that's what I would say in order to answer the question, what advice I can give to medical school students personally. The second question that I have is, how many schools did you apply to, and how many hours did you spend on each application or in total? Okay, so this question, in terms of how many schools I applied to, applying as a third-year undergraduate student, I only applied to 2 schools, and I'll get into the details as to why I only applied to 2 schools. The schools that I applied to were McMaster and University of Ottawa, and I'm very lucky that I was interviewed at the University of Ottawa, and I also got accepted there. In terms of why I only applied to 2 schools, I think that just the application process overall, which actually leads into the next question. Okay, so I'll actually talk about this in the next question, because the next question directly relates to why I actually applied to 2 schools and what I would recommend. But in terms of how much time I spent on the application process, I spent roughly, at least I would say, 2 months. So I wrote my MCAT in July, end of July, and after I wrote my MCAT, I had August and September, 2 full months in order to work on my LSAT application. So for the 2 schools that I applied to, I worked on them for nearly 2 months, and this included the autobiographical sketch predominantly, and also the Casper test, which is mandatory for McMaster as well as the University of Ottawa. And I found that spending a lot of time was very useful for me personally, because this application process, it's not something that you know, you do the night before, like studying for your midterms or doing your final assignment. It's not something, because it is a long process, and it's something that's, you know, very valuable. If you do it correctly, it can pretty much, you know, fulfill your dream. You can accomplish your dream if you do it correctly, and if you end up getting an enrollment to any medical school. So I found that it was very important to really spend time on it. The autobiographical sketch was something that I got edited by several other individuals, some of which were you know, medical students, and some of which were even colleagues of mine who were in upper years and really knew how to work on it. MD Consultants also has a wonderful consulting team that looks at the autobiographical sketches and also the Casper test. So I would definitely recommend that you reach out to MD Consultants, and it's a very good, the help that they provide is extremely valuable for just, you know, increasing your chances of getting into medical school in any application cycle. I also found that in order to prepare for the Casper test, it was nice to really take the 2 months to work on my autobiographical sketch. And once I had the autobiographical sketch sort of, like, you know, finalized and written out, laid out perfectly, I was then able to focus my time on the Casper test. Just in terms of logistics, that first, in order to book your date for the Casper test, it's important that you actually submit your OMSIS application, because you do get a code at the end of your OMSIS application that then allows you to register for the Casper test. The Casper test is something that I'll be talking to you about in the upcoming questions, so stay tuned for that as well. Okay, so in terms of the third question, it says, would you recommend applying to as many medical schools as possible? All right, so just to give you a brief background as to why I applied to 2 medical schools, especially as a third-year undergraduate student, I found that to answer this question, yes, I would recommend to applying to as many medical schools as possible, of course, because it's a wise decision in order to increase your chances and to maximize the likelihood of getting into at least one medical school in Canada. But personally, I think that another reason as to why individuals may not necessarily want to apply to many medical schools is, especially with OMSIS, you have to be very strategic. It can be a financial burden, because at times, every school in Canada is roughly $100 to $125 application fee, and you really have to look at your demographics to see what kind of experiences you have and really tailor your strengths and weaknesses to what the medical schools are looking for. So for example, as a third-year applicant, I knew going to U of T as a U of T undergraduate student, that U of T's Faculty of Medicine, they are really heavy on research, and they really prioritize individuals who are very focused on research and becoming future researchers. So those who have publications. And especially as a third-year student, I did not have a single publication. I did not even have that many research experiences because I was just starting off and discovering my passion for research. So discovering what area of research I want to focus on and how I can seek out further opportunities. So by the time that I was applying, which was last year, September, at that time, my research aspect was not as strong as it is right now, and so I thought that, especially as a third-year student, I would not necessarily stand out from the many PhD students and the master students who will also apply in terms of the application pool for U of T's requirement. U of T also requires their third-year applicants to be much more competitive in a way, right? Because which is obvious because you're also at the same time competing with individuals who've had several degrees before applying to U of T medicine, and those individuals who have done incredible things in a way. So that is one of the reasons I decided not to apply to U of T. In terms of Queens, Queens is actually something that is sort of like a black box. No one really knows what's happening with the admissions committee. So I personally decided that I did not want to I want to spend my money wisely in a way, and if I did not make it in third year, then obviously I would apply to as many schools as possible come fourth year. And then Western University, you could only apply to as a fourth-year student or higher, and so that only left me with 2 options, McMaster as well as University of Ottawa. And to answer this question, I would definitely, if you have the time and the resources, I would definitely recommend applying to as many medical schools as possible. I know a couple of friends, even in this application cycle, who will be applying this year, who are applying to not just all Ontario schools, but also all schools throughout Canada, whether that's UBC, whether that's Memorial University or Dalhousie, etc., and also individuals who are applying overseas, so for example, the States, the Caribbean, Ireland, etc. So in order to increase your chances, if medicine is your goal, and if you feel that you want to achieve it in this much time, so you want to get an acceptance by the next application cycle, I would definitely recommend that you apply to as many medical schools as possible. But again, that might depend from person to person, depending on what your background is, what type of statistics you have, and also what type of resources, whether it's a financial burden, which it can be for many, so it's very up to the individual. one more thing on applying to as many medical schools, I would also, when I talk about statistics, I would recommend that you definitely tailor your application to the school you want to apply for. So for example, McMaster has a very high CARS cutoff, which is the critical and analytical reasoning skills section. And so if your CARS score is on the lower end, it may not be worth applying to McMaster. But again, that's a personal decision, which is completely understandable. As well as, let's say, for example, Western has specific cutoffs that they list on their website for CARS and chemistry and biology. And so if you don't meet those cutoffs, then it may not necessarily be worth it to spend the additional $125 and then still not see an interview invite or not even an acceptance. So it's a very personal decision, but yes, if you do have the resources and also the statistics to be eligible for all the different schools, then I would definitely recommend that you do apply to as many medical schools as possible. Now, the fourth question is, what is the hardest part about medical school applications? So in terms of the hardest part about medical school applications, I would definitely, in terms of the process, I would say that it's the waiting time. Personally, from my experience, I think that the waiting, because even applying to medical school, it's a very long process. Not just being eligible to apply, which obviously you have to do your undergrad, at least 3 years of your undergraduate studies, and also perhaps pursue a master's or PhD to raise up the GPA and be eligible. But I would also say that even from the minute that you write your MCAT to when you actually get an acceptance, it's almost a 1-year wait. So 12 months we're talking about, which personally I found to be the hardest part, and especially staying sane in those 12 months and knowing what the future holds. I found that the suspense essentially of whether you're good enough or whether you'll be eligible for even an interview, or even after the interview, what will happen? Will you be accepted or rejected or on the wait list? That can really get frustrating. So my advice for that, for individuals going through that or who will embark on that journey, is to really think about other things. Medical school is definitely a very important process or a very important checkpoint in your dream of becoming a physician, but at the same time, it's not everything. So it's very important to remember that there is life outside of medicine, and what can really be helpful during these times of stress, whether it's waiting for an interview invite, waiting for an offer, or even just writing your MCAT, is to really stay close to your support system. Talk to your friends, especially those who are not in medicine. Stay close to your family, and just ask how their day was, how you can help them or how they can help you. That I found was really essential to staying in balance and for my own well-being while going through this process. In terms of what the hardest part about medical school applications was, I would definitely say that it's about the application process itself, so the ABS for sure, because the ABS actually plays a huge role in increasing your chances depending on the types of activities you have done, because a lot of this medical school is, getting into medical school is one about the statistics, so that's your GPA and your MCAT, and two, about how well of an individual you are, so how well-rounded you are. And I found that when it comes to being well-rounded, that's what gets most applicants. And so on the autobiographical sketch, the activities you've done, the way you phrase those activities, and how you shape that activity you've done, and how you reflect on those activities, that really makes a difference between a good candidate and a stellar candidate. I have from personal experience seen individuals with 520 plus MCAT scores with almost a 4.0 GPA who still have not gone into medical school. And that's simply because of what makes an individual aside of the numbers that they have against them. So a lot of these individuals, right, it's very important to remember that as a physician, yes, you have to be intelligent, you have to be very smart, but at the same time, you have to be well-rounded. If you're not well-rounded, then this can really disrupt your way of lifestyle. The current issue in medicine is about depression and burnout, so you want to make sure that you're really keeping yourself in check and still are able to be competent to hit those academic goals, to hit those extracurriculars, and still be a well-rounded individual, which will really help out during the interview stage of this process. So personally, for me, I think the hardest part was the waiting period, but aside of that, it was about conveying how I am a well-rounded individual to the admissions committee and to the selection committee that was going over the autobiographical sketch and other aspects of the application. Okay. So the next question is, can you provide any advice for the ABS? So definitely, I do have some points written down. In terms of the autobiographical sketch, as I mentioned before, this is something that is a big part of your application. And so it's very important that you take it seriously. It's just as important as is writing your MCAT exam or writing your Casper test. And so you want to make sure that with your autobiographical sketch ABS, you spend as much time as possible. I would definitely recommend that you start early. And so for me, I took 2 months just to set up my autobiographical sketch and to continuously edit it. Just because even the words that you use, even for example, there is a character limit on the ABS, so it's important that you're conveying not just what you did, but also how that activity stands out from other activities you've done, or even how your own ABS stands out from the ABS of other individuals. Remember that the admissions committee has to review at least around 5,000 to 6,000 applications, and they had to screen out nearly 4,000 of those applicants. So in order to make sure that they don't screen you out, you really have to convey the message that you really stand out and you've had experiences that other individuals don't have, and that you can bring something unique to the physician competencies, to the medical school that you're applying to. And so I think what was helpful for me is starting off early and then also deciding which activities to include and which ones not to. The ABS actually has approximately 32 different activities that you can list, which is broken down into different clusters. So extracurriculars, volunteering, honors and awards, employment, research, etc. And so it's important to make sure that you not only pick the right activities you want. So by the right activities, I mean something that's important to you, something that's significant, not what you think the admissions committee will like. I know this is a common misconception because a lot of people think that, oh, I'll write this and I'll be the perfect MD candidate. I'll be the perfect pre-medical student that they would love to have. And that's often not the case. A lot of people do end up getting rejected just because they tailor it so that they write things that the admissions committee, they think the admissions committee will love hearing, but then it doesn't sound genuine enough, and it doesn't necessarily reflect who you are as a person, which really comes out in the interview. So you want to make sure that, currently in my class, I've had colleagues who have come from computer science, who have come from music, from the arts, and it's very important that medical school is not about being the perfect biology student or being the perfect chemistry student, but it's about whoever you are. It's about expressing that through your experiences, how will your experiences make you a more mature physician and a more competent physician to serve the patient population that is currently in need. So it's about bringing all of your experiences, whatever extracurriculars you've done, and reflecting on those, which was very important, I guess, for the ABS section. And as I mentioned before, you need to make sure that you select activities that you are passionate about and not what the admissions committee want to hear. So I have a question here from Faiza, and it says, what do you recommend for high school students just entering in grade 9 to establish their pathways if they are targeting med school down the road? Okay. All right, so in terms of high school students entering grade 9, that is fairly early, but I would definitely say that the earlier you are in this process, the more it is, the better it is for you down the road. Particularly because I would say that when you're entering high school, it's nice to have something in mind, but you also want to make sure that for something like medicine, it's something that you really want to make it a lifelong passion, a lifelong calling, not just a job. that you'd call it. So one advice I would say is to get involved in as many clinical experiences or healthcare related experiences as possible. For example, when I was in high school, I volunteered at the long-term care center, so at the nursing home, old age home, and really got that patient interaction going. So from those experiences, I really realized that this was an atmosphere I enjoyed, and this was an environment that I wanted to see myself in down the road, just talking to patients and really caring for their needs and caring for their health. Another thing I would recommend is that it's very valuable if you start early, because when you apply to medical school, they do look for how long you have been involved in those activities. So for example, I know a lot of friends who've had activities that lasted a month or 2 months, and admissions committee don't really enjoy seeing these, because one, it shows your lack of commitment to the activities you've done, and to the admissions committee, more often than not, because they've seen 5,000 applicants, they do realize that majority of these applicants are doing it just to fill in their autobiographical sketch and to make it seem like they're doing a lot, when it's really about how long you do it for that matters. So I'll say the average dedication time for any activity would be around 6 months minimum to at least a year, in order for the admissions committee to really, notice that yes, you have done these activities. Whether you like it or not is a different matter, but you've stayed committed to it, and after a period of a month, or sorry, after a period of a year, or perhaps even 6 months, you're able to let that go because it wasn't something that you would see yourself doing. So some activities I had in high school were a long-term care center, volunteering at the hospital, whether that's in the emergency and even in the lobby. That can go a long way into helping you realize that the clinical setting is something that you are truly interested in and want to see yourself in. But that also shows the admissions committee that this individual seems to be very dedicated to what they're doing and would indeed make a great physician, because they'll be passionate about what they're doing, not simply just look for the time when they should end their shift and go home, sort of like a 9-to-5 job, because that's not what medicine is about. So if you're really focused on doing it for the sake of doing things, then medicine wouldn't exactly work for you. It's more about you how to be dedicated to it and passionate about what you're doing. I would also say that when you're entering grade 9, it's very important to also map out some of the experiences that you'd want. So not just extracurriculars, volunteering, but there are other experiences that really help you navigate this healthcare journey. For example, there are summer sessions. There are summer sessions which are held, such as the mini medical school that's held by McMaster's Faculty of Medicine. The University of Toronto Faculty of Medicine also hosts these workshops for pre-medical students who are in high school and first-year undergrad who are aspiring to enter the field of healthcare. So you really want to take advantage of these activities, because these are things that can go on your ABS and can really show the admissions committee that this person has had previous experience in this field and can see themselves going forward despite having all these obstacles along the way, can see themselves going forward in this profession. So that's very good to have. And I would also note one more thing, that when you're in grade 9 or in high school for that matter, it's also very important that you take advantage of any opportunities you have. A lot of my friends, which I wasn't aware of at the time, is a lot of my friends are now currently doing research over the summer while still being in high school. So whether that's grade 9, grade 10, a lot of the research department has gone much better in the past 2-3 years, that they do give opportunities to high school students, and that's very valuable. So really getting that research experience in high school, getting the volunteering, the extracurriculars, and still maintaining those marks and maintaining the academic excellence can go a long way into increasing your chances, not just when you're in university and applying, but also when you're in medical school, because you would have been used to this work environment and to the academic rigors of medical school and life as a physician. So I hope that answers your question, Faiza. Just let me know if you have any follow-up questions, or if you guys have any other questions, please do write them down in the comment section below. I'll move on to the next question. So the next question is, how did you start preparing for the Casper exam? Okay, so for the Casper exam, this is an exam that's obviously a test your personality and your ability to respond to situations in an ethical and clinical setting. And this is required in Ontario for McMaster's Michael G. DeGroote School of Medicine, and also for University of Ottawa's Faculty of Medicine. In order to prepare for Casper, what I did was I started off by reading books, simply because I really enjoy reading medically relevant books. So for example, the books that I read was one, the classic one is Doing Right, by Philip Ebert, and this is actually recommended for all pre-medical and medical students across Ontario. So Doing Right was one in which there were medical ethics-related questions, which were really useful in allowing you to tackle medical ethically relevant situations, and also they also provide you solutions which you can then use in order to really change your way of thinking and to realize how physicians would actually respond to these situations. Another book that I read was Good Medicine, and Good Medicine was actually by the same author. These books are very valuable because they help you realize how to respond to situations differently, but they also provide you with multiple perspectives, not just your own perspective, but also about how other people would respond in these situations. And so I read those two books. I also did a lot of sample questions. So for example, online, if you try looking up for sample questions, you may be able to find some, but I think that the best resources are from MD Consultants. MD Consultants has a lot of Casper prep material, and also a lot of the consultants who work for the company definitely have been very successful in the Casper test, so I definitely recommend reaching out to them. Another thing that I did in order to prepare for my Casper test was just read up on situations around the world, because oftentimes they will ask you questions that are existing issues in healthcare, whether that's about the opioid crisis, physician burnout, how to deal with medical negligence and patient compassion and patient therapeutic compliance. So it's very important to stay in the know about those information, those news articles, and also to make sure that you're aware of the current events that are going on in the world. And finally, the last question I have is, how can I stand out as an applicant? I think that the best piece of advice I can give in terms of how any individual can stand out as an applicant is honestly to be yourself. This was an advice that I received continuously as a pre-medical student who was going through the OMSIS application process. And at the time, I really did not believe in this. But the minute I saw my colleagues who I felt were much more competent than me in terms of the experiences they had, the minute I saw them not getting into medical school, some of them not even in Canada and having to go overseas, that's when I realized that it's not about what type, how many experiences rather you have. It's more about what type of experiences you have and what you can bring to the table. I know it can be very easy to see your peers as your competition and get caught up into comparing yourself with them. But I think that what really helped was once you actually realize the unique opportunities that you've had in your life. For example, for me, I was able to work with refugee families while in high school. So going back to Faiza's question, that's something you can also do, which I was lucky to have the opportunity. I was able to work with refugee families and newcomer Indigenous individuals, and to really get to know their experiences while also looking after their academic needs. So I was actually a tutor for them at the time. And I think that personal experience that I had, I was able to reflect on it a lot more throughout my application process and also in my interview. And that's what really stood out for me, because not a lot of my other peers who were also applying and who are currently in medical school had the same opportunity as I did in terms of working with refugee families. So I think that was something that really made me stand out. In terms of general advice, I'll definitely say to look at or seek out opportunities that are just beyond the normal clubs that your school offers, the extracurriculars, the employment opportunities, but to really enjoy what makes you yourself. And whether you're from a poor, socially poor background, or whether you're from a different financial class, that really does not matter in terms of how that affects your application chances. It's about what you can bring, your personality, and it's much more important for medical schools to look at individuals who will be friendly as a physician and who will really take the time to take care of the patients and to listen to them, than individuals who are simply extremely brilliant people but who are arrogant and who are unwilling to listen. So I would say that in order to stand out as an applicant, you definitely need a very welcoming personality, and at the same time you want to just share the experiences that you've had rather than focusing on other people's experiences and then worrying about how that affects your chances in the end. Because I'd really say it does not. What other people do will not affect your own chances of getting into medical school. So I think that's it in terms of the questions that we've received today. But before I do end off, I'd just like to say that MD Consultants provides comprehensive application review through one-on-one consultations with medical school consultants. And to book an appointment, please visit mdconsultants.ca. You can also ask them about the admissions guarantee program by emailing info@mdconsultants.ca. And I hope you guys learned something. I hope this session was valuable. And please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Feel free to reach out at MD Consultants, and me or someone else will definitely be there to help you and answer your questions. Thank you for joining in today, and I hope you guys have a great rest of the day and happy journey in your time in your application process and in your journey of becoming a physician. Thank you.